When humanity answered our call for help, the holographic message crackled to life in the dimly lit council chamber of the Zelani coalition. High Chancellor Rezikara leaned forward, her scales shimmering in the reflected blue light of the transmission. The image displayed a desperate message from the edge of coalition space, a broadcast sent on all frequencies, in every known language, in a voice that trembled with fear and pleading. Our world is burning. A moment of stunned silence hung in the room, each council member digesting the implications. The voice was unfamiliar yet unmistakable, the lone isolated species known as humans. Until now, humanity had only been a whisper, a persistent rumor of a civilization on the edge of explored space. They were rumored to be a resilient species, but even resilient worlds could burn. Rezikara knew the voice of desperation when she heard it. The coalition had responded to countless such calls, always too late. The helplessness that clawed at her gut was familiar, yet this time, it was laced with something unexpected, a burning hope that, just maybe, the humans would have something the coalition had long lacked, a fighting spirit that wouldn't let them die quietly. Far from the council chamber, in the heart of Sol's asteroid belt, a coalition scout ship floated, silent and alone. The pilot, a young Zelani named Tekris, stared at the data that scrolled across his monitor. Humanity's message had spread far, reaching every sensor, and the translation was grim. It detailed an assault by an unstoppable force, an entity known only in whispers, the Marok Swarm. The Swarm. A name that had become a synonym for extinction. Tekris's claws shook as he transmitted his findings back to the coalition. The Marok had never struck beyond the inner rim. The humans' location was barely on the map, far from any coalition worlds. Yet here they were, making their final stand alone. Or at least, that was the expectation. Until Tekris received a priority message from High Chancellor Rezikara herself. Tekris, her voice held the weight of 1,000 worlds. Prepare yourself. Humanity has summoned the coalition. And this time, we will not be late. The call. Meanwhile, on Earth, Major Elias Harding paced the control room in one of the newly fortified underground bunkers. He watched his screen flicker with maps of enemy positions, each red dot representing another loss of territory to the swarm. The military had been forced to retreat, pushing civilians into bunkers or high-orbit facilities. The call for aid had been their last, desperate attempt. Commander, a young lieutenant called, her voice strained. Incoming message, alien origin, coalition mark. Harding froze. The coalition was real? Every intelligence report had marked them as a myth, an advanced society too far away to be concerned with human struggles. And yet, here they were. He could hardly breathe as he opened the message, watching as a holographic form took shape in front of him, a tall, reptilian figure with eyes that shimmered with something close to empathy. We have heard your call, humans of Earth, said the figure, her voice gentle yet strong. And we are coming. A murmur rippled through the control room as disbelief turned into an emotion long abandoned, hope. In the coalition fleet, Tekris watched as ship after ship powered up, preparing to dive into an unknown battle against one of the deadliest enemies the galaxy had ever known. Rumors spread that the humans were on their last line of defense, fighting for every inch of their scorched world. As the jump sequence initiated, Tekris muttered a silent prayer, wondering what awaited them on the other side. Across the stars, humanity braced itself for a fight that they could not win alone, yet refused to surrender to. And as they prepared for the worst, they heard the roar of unfamiliar engines piercing the sky, a sound that brought tears to weary soldiers and civilians alike. It was the sound of allies, arriving just in time. The sky above Earth was painted with streaks of blue and silver as the coalition fleet descended through the atmosphere. Massive ships, some glinting like polished obsidian, others radiating an alien glow, hovered above the burning cities, their engines humming in synchrony. Humans on the ground stared up in awe, momentarily forgetting the impending threat of the Marok swarm. For the first time in months, Earth had visitors, and they weren't here to conquer, they were here to help. In the main coalition flagship, the Radiant Dawn, High Chancellor Rezikara addressed her gathered crew and the delegation of human military commanders now beamed aboard. Among them stood Major Elias Harding, his expression a hardened mix of gratitude and skepticism. He had fought on countless battlefields, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of interstellar allies answering Earth's cry for aid. We have faced the swarm before, Rezikara began, her voice deep and resonant. They are ruthless, relentless, Their single purpose is to consume, but we are not defenseless. Together, we will drive them back. Harding stepped forward, his gaze meeting Rezakara's. With respect, Chancellor, the Marak are not just another invading force. They've taken city after city. They adapt to our strategies, counter our weapons. Humanity, we're on the edge of extinction. His words were hard, but he needed the alien commanders to understand the gravity of the situation. Rezakara's slitted eyes softened, and she reached out a scaled hand, placing it on Harding's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. Major Harding, I know fear when I see it, and I see courage beneath it, burning brightly. Humanity will not stand alone. Show us the battleground, and we will show you how the coalition fights. The swarms advance. Just hours after the coalition's arrival, the swarm breached the perimeter defenses on Earth's Pacific coast. They came as they always did, an endless tide of blackened, armored creatures, each one equipped with serrated limbs and venomous mandibles. Their hissing filled the air, a sound that seemed to erode hope itself. But this time, waiting for them were not only human soldiers but also rows of coalition mechs, their sleek designs outfitted with weaponry that Earth's engineers could barely comprehend. The Zilani warriors, swift and elegant, flanked the humans on one side, while the towering Tarvik, a race of stone-skinned giants, formed an unbreakable wall on the other. In the center of it all stood Major Harding, side by side with Tekris, his new Zilani comrade. Their eyes met for a brief, silent moment, an understanding passing between them. Different worlds, different species, but for this fight, they were united. The swarm charged. Hold the line, Harding bellowed, his voice carrying over the din of alien and human weapons firing as one. Plasma beams sizzled, energy pulses cracked through the air, and coalition fighters took to the skies, diving into the thick of the enemy like falcons descending on prey. Tekris, piloting a lightweight yet deadly assault mech, shouted over the comms, their carapaces are weakest at the thorax and neck, aim high. Following his direction, the human soldiers adjusted their aim, targeting the vulnerable points. Hundreds of swarm creatures fell in seconds, their once impenetrable bodies punctured by plasma rounds and high-intensity lasers. Cheers erupted among the soldiers as the swarm faltered, something they had never done before. A bond forged in battle. Hours stretched into a brutal, bloody day, the human and coalition forces gradually pushing the swarm back. By nightfall, the battlefield was littered with the shattered remains of Marak creatures. Exhausted soldiers leaned against their rifles, some patching up their comrades, others staring out at the eerily quiet front lines with hollow eyes. In a brief moment of respite, Harding found himself next to Tekris, who was tending to a wound on his shoulder, his green blood staining his uniform. "You all right?" Harding asked, taking a seat beside him. Tekris chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Your human medics seem overly concerned with what they call infection, but yes, I am. All right." He looked out over the desolate battlefield, his gaze darkening. "The swarm, they will return, fiercer than before, they always do." Harding nodded grimly. "We'll be ready. With your help, we have a fighting chance." He paused, his voice softening. "You know, Tekris, we weren't sure if anyone out there would hear us, let alone care. We thought we were alone in this fight." Tekris' gaze shifted to Harding, his eyes glinting with something resembling pride. "For many cycles, we in the Coalition have held to an ancient belief that every life has value, every world a right to exist. When you called, we knew we could not leave you to face the darkness alone." A silence fell between them, but it was a comfortable one. Two soldiers from different stars, finding common ground in a shared fight. A new kind of warfare. As dawn broke, the Coalition scientists and human engineers worked side by side, studying the remains of the fallen swarm to understand their biology, to learn and adapt. Weapons were modified, new defensive structures erected, and tactical approaches altered. What humanity lacked in advanced technology, they compensated with an almost reckless ingenuity, a willingness to try what others would dismiss as impossible. Within days, a new weapon was developed, a concentrated plasma cannon, specifically calibrated to target the swarm's molecular structure. The prototype was tested in a daring strike, vaporizing an entire wave of Marak attackers in seconds. When High Chancellor Rezakara received the results, her astonishment was clear. "You humans, you make miracles out of desperation." Harding, watching the first successful test, simply smiled. "We've had a lot of practice." The Coalition's high command, though initially skeptical, had come to see that the humans' resilience and creativity were their greatest weapons. In those short days, the coalition was no longer simply protecting Earth, they were fighting alongside humanity, as equals and allies. As the next wave of Marak swarm crested over the horizon, coalition and human forces braced themselves, the line between alien and human blurred by the shared determination in every eye. This battle was far from over, but for the first time, Earth's defenders knew one thing for certain: they would not stand alone. Earth's war-torn landscape stretched out beneath a bruised sky. Coalition and human soldiers prepared for the next assault. Reinforced positions marked by trenches lined with makeshift fortifications and glimmering energy barriers. The alliance had shifted from a fragile cooperation to a unified force, each species learning from the other in the desperate effort to hold back the Marak swarm. The coalition's secret. In the command bunker deep beneath New Rome, the human capital, Major Harding and High Chancellor Rezakara convened with their senior officers. A holomap displayed the spread of the Marak swarm, clusters of red dots symbolizing the relentless advance of their forces. But what Harding noticed most was a set of data streams being hidden, encrypted with an alien code unfamiliar to human systems. "Chancellor," Harding said, looking at Rezakara with suspicion, "what aren't you telling us? There's something different about these new attacks. Every night, they're adapting faster, coming up with new formations and tactics." Rezakara's scales seemed to dim, and after a moment's hesitation, she met his gaze. "Major, there is something we have not shared, something I feared might destabilize our alliance." "Go on," Harding replied, crossing his arms. Rezakara took a deep breath, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "The Marak swarm, they are not mindless, they are driven by a consciousness, an entity we call the hive mind. It learns, adapts, evolves with every encounter, every fallen soldier, every new weapon we deploy. It absorbs. Like some kind of living intelligence?" Harding's eyes narrowed, a cold realization settling over him. "Yes, our people encountered the swarm centuries ago," Rezakara continued, her gaze haunted. "The coalition's most classified files document entire worlds that fell, each one faster than the last as the hive mind learned. But this, fighting them alongside you humans, this is the first time I've seen them slowed. Your tactics, your improvisations, the swarm is struggling to adapt." The implications sank in. The humans' unpredictability was proving to be their greatest advantage, the one thing the hive mind couldn't predict, couldn't fully integrate. "Then let's make it work in our favor," Harding said, a fierce resolve igniting in his eyes. "If this hive mind adapts, then we'll keep throwing new variables at it, things it can't prepare for." A plan takes shape. Within hours, coalition and human engineers and scientists were working tirelessly to implement Harding's plan. Their first tactic would involve a weapon of human design, the improvised high-frequency disruptor. It was untested in a real fight, yet simulations suggested it could temporarily disrupt the hive mind's command signals, effectively cutting individual Marak creatures off from the collective intelligence. To deploy it, however, required someone to get close, dangerously close, and despite offers from both sides, Harding insisted it would be a human who made the first strike. Takriz, now Harding's trusted friend, protested immediately. "You can't simply throw yourself into the swarm's heart, Harding. If this device fails, that's a risk I'm willing to take." Takriz, "Besides, you know as well as I do that unpredictability is what gives us the edge. The swarm can't adapt if they don't see it coming." Takriz's eyes were fierce, but he nodded, conceding to Harding's determination. He would accompany Harding into the field, covering him as he deployed the disruptor at the optimal range. The team assembled at dawn. A small group of volunteers, human and coalition alike, prepared to advance into the Marak-infested region under cover of darkened skies. Each member knew the risks, but the knowledge that their actions could shift the tide of the entire war lent them a quiet, steely resolve. The disruptor strike. With each step, the ground became darker and slicker from the remnants of past battles, the air thick with the scent of scorched metal and the acrid bite of alien blood. As Harding's team moved closer to the target site, the sounds of the swarm grew louder, a relentless, rhythmic chittering that echoed like an unholy symphony in the dark. Approaching target range, Takriz whispered, glancing at Harding as they neared a cluster of Marak creatures guarding the hive's forward command post. The disruptor's coordinates were only a few hundred meters ahead, but each step felt like miles. Finally, they reached the target area, hidden beneath the twisted remains of an ancient human building. With steady hands, Harding activated the disruptor. positioning it carefully on the exposed ground. It was a small, unassuming device about the size of a human helmet, yet its impact, if successful, would be monumental. Setting frequency to maximum range, Harding murmured, his voice a barely audible tremor in the silence. Tekris crouched beside him, eyes on the horizon. "I've got your back, Major." Harding gave him a quick nod, then pressed the final activation key. The disruptor hummed to life, emitting a low-frequency pulse that vibrated through the ground. For a moment, the world was silent. And then, all hell broke loose. The Marok creatures nearest to them began to thrash wildly, emitting high-pitched shrieks as they disconnected from the hive mind. Their orderly formations dissolved, and the once cohesive swarm turned into a chaotic, mindless rabble. It was working, the hive mind's connection was severed, if only temporarily. The tide turns. "Now, all units, open fire," Harding barked into his calm, and within seconds, the human coalition forces surged forward from their hidden positions. Plasma cannons, pulse rifles, and electromagnetic projectiles lit up the battlefield as they rained down on the disoriented swarm. Without the guidance of the hive mind, the Marok fought with reckless, aimless aggression, easily picked off by the coalition forces now advancing on all fronts. Harding and Tekris fought side by side, moving seamlessly in a deadly dance as they cut through the disoriented creatures. "Harding," Tekris called out over the din, a note of urgency in his voice. "The hive mind, it's attempting to re-establish control." Sure enough, Harding could see the swarm beginning to regroup, their movements growing more coordinated as the hive mind strained to override the disruptor's effects. They didn't have much time. "All forces, fall back to defensive positions," Harding shouted. The disruptor had bought them precious minutes, but if they stayed, they would be overrun. As his team began a controlled retreat, Harding kept his gaze fixed on the swarm's shifting masses, noting the flickers of confusion still present in their ranks. The swarm was weakened, and they had struck a blow, but it was clear that this was only the beginning. A final stand or a new alliance. As the team returned to base, a new plan took shape in Harding's mind. He met with Rezikara, Tekris, and the coalition's commanders, laying out his vision for an all-out assault on the swarm's heart, a direct strike against the hive mind itself. The coalition's commanders looked at one another, shock evident in their expressions. Direct attacks on the hive mind had been attempted before, always ending in catastrophic losses, but this time, they had something the swarm couldn't predict: humanity's resilience and resourcefulness. Rezikara studied Harding's face, a mixture of fear and admiration in her gaze. "Your plan, it is bold, it is also incredibly risky." Harding's face was set with determination. "If we don't take this chance, they'll keep coming, adapting to everything we throw at them. We've got to cut off the head, and we've got to do it now." With one last glance at the council, Rezikara nodded. "Then let us prepare, for this will be a fight unlike any we have ever faced." As Earth's defenders prepared for the ultimate battle, the coalition's forces rallied, ready to strike at the heart of the swarm. Their combined resolve burned brighter than any fear. In this moment, they were no longer separate species, no longer isolated worlds. They were a unified force, bound by purpose and driven by hope. For humanity and the coalition alike, this would be the fight that would determine not only their survival, but the future of every free world in the galaxy. The coalition fleet mobilized on an unprecedented scale. Ships from a dozen species, each bearing the distinct markings and colors of their homeworlds, gathered in Earth's orbit, preparing for a coordinated strike on the Marok swarm's central hive. High Chancellor Rezikara's plan was audacious: a direct assault on the heart of the swarm, aiming to sever the hive mind's command center and cripple its ability to control its legions. Major Harding and his team of human and coalition soldiers readied for what could be their final battle. The air was thick with tension as they gathered in the staging area, every soldier carrying the weight of their species on their shoulders. The final assault. As the fleet warped into the heart of the swarm's territory, the view was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The swarm's ships were like nothing they'd seen before, grotesque, living vessels that pulsed with a sickly green light. The hive mind's lair, a colossal, organic station the size of a small moon, loomed ahead, surrounded by countless enemy ships. Harding took a deep breath, staring at the terrifying scene on the holoscreen. Tekris was beside him, his face set with grim determination. "We're here, Major," Tekris said, eyes scanning the swarm of enemy ships that began closing in. "This is it." Harding nodded, his voice steady. "For humanity, For the Coalition. For every world that's been burned by the swarm. With that, he turned to his team. Remember, our mission is to board the hive mind's lair. We take out the central neural network, and that's our shot at ending this for good. Hold the line. Don't let them break us. Rezakara's voice crackled over the comms. Coalition forces, begin advance. Strike squadrons, engage targets. Humanity's squadron, you're on the lead. And with those words, the final assault began. Into the hive. The boarding team descended into the hive mind's lair, facing wave after wave of Marak defenders. The corridors were organic and suffocating, walls pulsing as if alive, veins of greenish energy lighting the twisted passageways. Every corner revealed new horrors, massive, armored creatures with blade-like limbs, screeching as they charged. Harding led his team with unshakable resolve, each step forward a testament to the humans and Coalition forces who had fought and fallen to bring them to this moment. Focus on the neural core, Tekris called out over the comms. It should be close, the hive mind won't let us near without a fight. Their path was a brutal one, every inch contested by the swarm's most formidable warriors. Human soldiers and Coalition allies fought side by side, their trust in each other unbreakable. Plasma rounds, laser blasts, and human bullets tore through the enemy in a blaze of relentless fire. At last, they reached the hive mind's central chamber. The hive mind. The room was a massive, circular chamber bathed in eerie green light, with pulsating tendrils connecting to a central core suspended in the middle, a grotesque mass that radiated a dark intelligence. Harding could feel it, a presence pressing into his mind, cold, calculating, and filled with a terrifying sense of purpose. Tekris gripped his rifle tighter, his scales flaring. So, that's the hive mind. The presence spoke, not in words but in thoughts that reverberated in each of their minds, a voice like nails scraping against their thoughts. Why do you fight? You will all be consumed. Your resistance is futile. Harding clenched his jaw, raising his weapon. Maybe, but we're here to end this. With that, he signaled to his team, set the charges. As the explosives were planted around the central core, the hive mind's defenses activated, unleashing a final wave of Marak creatures from the walls, desperate to protect their master. The last stand. The battle was fierce, the human and Coalition soldiers fighting with every last ounce of strength. Blood and fire filled the air as they held their ground, refusing to give even an inch. Tekris fought beside Harding, both of them locked in a deadly rhythm, their bond unbreakable even in the face of certain death. One by one, the charges were set, their timers counting down to detonation. A sudden burst of green light filled the chamber, and the hive mind's presence surged, its voice echoing through their minds. You cannot destroy me, I am eternal, I am inevitable. Harding's grip tightened on his weapon, his voice defiant. You don't know humanity. As the final charge was set, Harding activated the detonator. All forces, fall back, now! The team raced back through the twisting corridors, fighting their way to the extraction point. Explosions began to tear through the hive mind's lair, green flames consuming the twisted organic structures as the charges detonated in sequence, unraveling the central neural network. Victory! Back aboard the Radiant Dawn, High Chancellor Rezakara and the Coalition's commanders watched as the hive mind's lair was engulfed in flames. A collective cheer erupted as the Marak swarm ships faltered, their movements erratic and disorganized, no longer guided by the unifying presence of the hive mind. Earth's defenders watched as the swarm dissolved, each ship now a mindless creature without direction. The Coalition's forces moved in, mopping up the remaining swarm vessels with precision and ease. The skies over Earth cleared, and for the first time, humanity and the Coalition could see the stars unobstructed. A new era. In the aftermath, humanity and the Coalition gathered in a ceremony to honor those who had fallen and to celebrate their unity. Major Harding stood beside Tekris, their once-worn uniforms freshly cleaned, medals glinting on their chests. Rezakara addressed the gathered crowd. Today, we have done more than just defeat a threat. We have forged a bond that transcends our differences, a bond that proves our strength when we stand together. Harding looked around at his human and alien allies, a feeling of profound pride welling up in his chest. Earth was safe, but more than that, humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had friends, allies, and a future that stretched out beyond the stars. As the crowd erupted into cheers, Harding and Tekris shared a quiet smile. They had fought together, bled together, and now they would rebuild together as partners, as equals. as a united front against whatever the cosmos might throw at them. Humanity had answered the call, and in doing so, they had become legends.